Well, we've been looking at the life of Jesus, and in order to do that, we have to pause and talk about those that followed him. And so we've been looking at the 12 disciples of Christ, the 12 apostles, and we talked about those definitions last time. And we spent some time looking at Simon Peter, if you remember. Peter's a man I can't wait to meet. Me and him got a lot in common, and yet I hope I finished the race as well as he did. But we're going to talk about some Jameses today. We'll talk about John. We'll see how far we can get. We put some icons up here, kind of get an idea of how those in the past have thought about what do these guys look like. And you remember as we started this study is that we don't know what they look like. We don't know what Jesus really looked like. And we don't know a lot about them. We'll talk about what we do know from the scriptures and church history and that. But they didn't talk about themselves a lot. They didn't say, well, I did this and I did that. And, you don't see that in the Word. As they're telling the story of Jesus, it's about what he did. And you see this with these that would follow Christ. It's not about us, is it? It's about him. Someday we're going to see him face to face and realize the time that we spent on ourselves meant very little, but the times that we spent on making him known. It's all about Jesus. You saw that when you came in. And boy, until this thing's over, until we're home, you'll hear that from this pulpit. It truly is all about Jesus, and these guys live that. So as we track with them, it's hard to pin some of these guys down who they are. We're talking about the Jameses, and we have several Jameses in the Bible. There's 3 of them that we want to take just a few minutes with. 2 of them were apostles, and 1 was instrumental in the early church. And the first one we know almost nothing about. James the Little, or James the Less, he's called. He's one that he's mentioned in the list of apostles, and yet beyond that, we don't know a lot. We know who his father is, Alphaeus, which is interesting because that's also Matthew's father's name. Could it be? And some have speculated that these 2 were brothers. Well, I don't know. Ask him when you see him, all right? We get there, hey, it's Jay. No, he wasn't my brother. It's hard to know. So again, we have to connect the dots in some of these things and say, well, we really don't know. We can speculate. We do know that his mother was very much connected with Jesus, was very much involved with that. We see her at the cross. We see her at the empty tomb. In fact, let me just read this in Mark 15. It says, there were also women looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the Less and Jose. And so we know he had a brother. We know that, again, James the Less, and Salome, which was somebody else's mother we'll talk about in just a little bit. But here you have James the Less, and his mother mentioned, involved with this, family mentioned in this, and very interesting. Well, the less, not that, it could be translated the less or the little. Some say, well, maybe he was a smaller guy at stature. Maybe it was just that there's not a lot said of him versus James the Great or the just or the righteous, James the Righteous, and try to distinguish those from each other. But the thing is this, and we'll move past him pretty quickly because, again, we have to speculate who he is. I am looking forward to meeting him because he is a great man of faith, even though we don't know much about him. You know that he was with Jesus those years. You know he walked with Jesus. And the tradition is that after Pentecost, which some of these guys, it's hard to track after that. We know where they're at at Pentecost. We do know when the church was born, Acts chapter 2, and that all that took place there. But after that, it's hard to track with them. Legend has them in Syria and Persia that this man made it to. And tradition also has him as being stoned to death. What we do know is that every one of these, and except with one that committed suicide and one that died an old man, we'll talk about him today, but all of them died a martyr's death. All of them lived it out. There's a lot of things that speak to the resurrection of Jesus. I was talking to somebody this week that said, I'm having trouble believing in the resurrection of Jesus, and we began to talk about that. But even in common sense, if you were to take a group of people, take a group of guys, these that follow Jesus, and make some story up that he rose from the dead and we hid his body and make this story up. Now take each one of them and put them to death in a brutal way. Do you think someone would crack? Do you think someone would say, look, he didn't raise from the dead? We made this up. His body's over there. No, these guys believed it. These guys were radical. Because you know why? Here's the deal, guys. Because it affected their lives. Because Jesus Christ was real, and you can't take that away from them. And when it happens to us, when we fall in love with Jesus, you can't take that away from us. And why are they being martyred even today? There's more people being martyred today than in the history of the church combined. There's more people being martyred today. You know why? Because it's real and it's radical. Because we're following Jesus. Because this is not just some religious thing we do. It's because it's real. He really does love us. He really does know us intimately. We really can have a relationship with Him. You really can talk with God. I'm not talking about channeling, and I'm not talking about New Age garbage. I'm talking about there really is. You know, I'm talking as a Christian. You know exactly what I'm saying. This is absolutely not just some thing that we're doing here. This is some club we're in or some religious thing that we do. It's because Jesus Christ has really changed our lives. Guys, listen, we will never be the same again because we know Him. Praise God for that. That's the difference between just a religion and a radical relationship with God. We'll never be the same again because He's changed us. James the Less and James the Righteous and James the Great and John and the rest of them were never the same again. They were more radical as they followed Him, because as we go down this journey, the longer we follow Him, the more we know. We say, walk by faith and not by sight. Well, we heard that when we were young in the Lord. But now it's real because we've walked by faith. And we didn't see how it was going to end, some of these things, the outcome of some situations and that. But we saw Him faithful time and time again. So it means growing with Him and following Him. James the Less. Again, one of the heroes of the faith. I don't know a lot about him. But you know what? He's there. But we do know a lot about the other Jameses. We do know some about, I should say. How about James? We call him James the Great, and maybe distinguish him from James the Little or James the Less. James and John, the sons of thunder. Remember those guys, right? We know about his dad Zebedee, his mother Salome, or Salome, however you want to say that. Probably pretty well-to-do. They had hired servants that was working in their fishing industry. They were known by the high priest. Probably a pretty well-to-do family for the Galilee area. And there's even a tradition. There's a coffee shop in Jerusalem that is supposed to be built on the ruins of the satellite office of James and John and their fish shop there in Jerusalem. I don't know. There's some way he was connected to the high priest. We know that with our story of the crucifixion of Jesus, the arrest and the trial and all that. You know what I'm talking about? And so the thing is this, is that he was known by them. So probably a more well-to-do family. But they had this reputation, the sons of thunder. Could that be the first bikers in the Bible? Maybe the camels that had the racing stripes on them. Come on, look at my camel. I've chopped this thing out, you know. Well, turn over to Luke chapter 9. Let's look at a couple of these stories. Luke chapter 9. You'll see an attitude here of where maybe they got this little nickname, sons of thunder. And now it came to pass when the time had come for him to be received up. Now notice here again, and we're in Luke chapter 9, verse 51, that he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. This is kind of a turning verse in our Life of Christ series as we're looking at Jesus as he's making his way to Jerusalem. This is a turning point. I've always seen this scripture as Jesus is doing miracles and the ministry that's going on, and the little alarm clock goes off in his heart. It's like you can almost see him. I wish you could see this moment. It's there. He's ministering. All of a sudden, it's time. Maybe he's kneeling over and ministering to somebody. He stands up. It's time. The rest of the journey is straight to Jerusalem. He talked about how his hour had not yet come up to this time, because there was an hour. There was a specific time that he was set for to go to that cross. And guys, understand this, that there is a specific time that he's going to come and return and take us home. There's a time. And when is it going to happen? I hope it's today. But there is a specific time on that cosmic clock, and it'll go tick, tick, tick. Boom, we're home. Looking forward to that. But this was here. He steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. He sent messages before his face, and as they went, they entered a village of the Samaritans to prepare for him. So he's ministering up in the Galilee area. It's time to go. The straight way down to Jerusalem, it's actually up to Jerusalem, but the straight way is to go right through Samaria. If you look at a map, you can see going right through Samaria. Many of the Jews would go around that area. And yet Jesus goes right through that area. But what he does is he sends a delegation out ahead of time because Jesus has got a group with him. We're not just talking about the disciples. We're talking a big group, 50 or more with him. So he sends a group in, go there into the city and tell them we're coming. And there's a big entourage that is coming with Jesus. So they go into the city of Samaria. Now, we know the story that... that already there had been some revivals there, the woman at the well, and the stories we'd already looked at in the life of Jesus. So there's already some that know him. But notice here it says, but they did not receive him because his face was set for the journey to Jerusalem. They didn't want him going through there. You go around this. You don't come through here. Not because him saying he's Messiah, because his tie to Judaism. Because there's a big rift going on between these two groups. There's always been big rifts going on in the groups in Israel. There's areas, we'll be in Israel in just 3 or 4 weeks with a group of you, a good-sized group of you. We'll be over in Israel, and there'll be areas that we won't go to. I won't take you there. I've been to some of these towns, and I won't take you there because it's not really safe to go there. Samaria. It'll be rare that I'll take you over there because it's still a pretty rough area. Been over there many times. We've also seen some of I think I told you the story of the guy that, the hotel owner that was with us probably 2 times back when we were there. And he was starting to bring in tourists and all that. And he got on the bus with us and went over to Samaria, some things we wanted to see over there. And because he was being so friendly to the American tourists there, they killed him and blew up his hotel. And so it's still a pretty rough area. So if you go to Israel, it's safe. By the way, I saw that, safe. Well, should we be going? It's safe. We just won't take you into some of these areas. So the point is there's still this rift that goes on in Israel. So with this, they don't understand, James and John thinking, they don't understand we got God with us. Do you know who this man is? This is deity incarnate. And they say this. The disciples, James and John, saw this and they said, Lord, do you want us? I think this is amazing how they said it. They want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them as alive. Let's just fireball. We'll walk right over the top of their ashes. I look at these guys and go, you know what? I'm pretty close to that sometimes. Get them, Jesus. You don't understand. We're going through whether you like it or not. I got Jesus here. Come on. Let's get them. Do you want us? Let us do it this time. But look what Jesus does. You think that Jesus goes, yeah, let's do that. That's not the heart of God. He turned and rebuked them and said, you do not know what manner of spirit you are of. For the Son of Man, listen to what he says, the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. They went to another village. And around that, let's just not go that direction. That's not what he came for. He didn't come to hurt people. He came to give us life and that more abundantly. He came to give us salvation. It's not that. Maybe God ought to work on our attitude sometimes. Work on your pastor's attitude sometimes. He's doing that. Finally, of all of you, be of one mind, Peter would tell us. Having compassion for one another. Love as brethren. Be tenderhearted. Be courteous. Not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling. But on the contrary, blessings. Knowing that you were called to this, that you may inherit a blessing. Not returning evil for evil, revile someone, you're going to revile them back. On the contrary, bless those. 1 Peter 3. Something I've been thinking about a lot. In fact, pasted it on the Facebook site there just a couple days ago. We've had some dialogue on it. So I'm thinking about this, and I'll just read what I wrote. In this life, when someone crosses our path, it might be that God wants to use us to help them on their journey to Him. Sometimes these people can be abrasive, sometimes very lost and lonely, or hurtful to others. Sometimes they have been hurt and carry huge scars, sometimes hiding behind self-righteousness. Could it be that God in his love for us puts us together to help each other towards home? I was thinking a lot about that. God puts people on our path that we really would be like these guys. God, fry their face. Send fireball from heaven and consume them. They don't understand what they're doing. And God says, you don't even know what spirit you're of. He didn't come for that. Maybe, guys, we ought to be praying a whole lot more. Lord, teach us to love the way that you love. The people know that they're loved no matter what they're struggling with, no matter what their hang-ups are, no matter what things that they're issuing. And no, not making light of sin and saying, well, you can just come on in here and let's party together and let's do. No, not at all. Because following God will clean us from the inside out, though. Isn't that true? It is so cool to watch somebody coming that is so filled with addictions of certain things or whatever it is, and you watch God change lives. It is so cool. You see that you're not the same person you were. And when God does that to us, it makes us a lot more. But don't forget that he's done that. It makes us a whole lot more gracious with people. Instead of saying, God, fry them, sons of thunder, get them, Lord. Maybe we ought to be praying, Lord, help us to love the way that you love. Help them to see them through your eyes. If they're in our path, and sometimes they're right in our path, right in our way, and we don't want them in our path, maybe God has brought them there to you to help you on your journey of dying to self-righteousness, of dying to judgmental attitudes. Maybe God has brought them to you for you to help each other towards home. That's a cool thing. Makes it a lot easier as we keep our eyes on him and we start ministering to people. Because this person that God has placed in your life, maybe God wants you to minister to. Well, I don't like him. That's my boss, or that's my coworker, and that's this person that's so, that's my neighbor, or that's my family member, that's my ex-husband, or my ex-wife, fill in the blank. But just maybe God has placed us together so that we can help each other towards him. Amen? That's a basic concept. Man, if we could get that, our life would be so much better. Maybe instead of fighting with one another, maybe we ought to be trying to help each other towards home. That's all I'm trying to say. And I read this, and these guys, I got a lot of this in me, and so do you. Get them, Lord. Get them. Sons of thunder, sons of thunder. Whether they still don't get it, there's a lot of things they didn't get, these brothers, James and John. Turn to Matthew chapter 20. Let's look at one more of these stories with these guys. James and John. Matthew chapter 20. I love this story because they are almost in Jerusalem now. Remember, Jesus said, steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. Now they're almost at Jerusalem, almost where all these things are going to take place. Jesus is warning them over and over again. This is what's going to take place. Matthew chapter 20, look at verse 17. Matthew 20, verse 17. Now Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples aside on the road and said to them, Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and the scribes, and they'll condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and to scourge and to crucify. And the third day he will raise again. Right? So that's what's going on. Listen, guys, this is what we're doing. We're going to Jerusalem. This is what's going to happen. He's very specific in that. Notice the next word in verse 20. Then the mother of... Did you not hear what Jesus just said? Listen to what happens next. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him, notice this, with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. Now I love this. When we've met Bruce Marciano that played Jesus in the Matthew films. I love when he plays this part right here, because you just see it. He's in the film, he's playing it as he's there, he's kind of bent over a well, drinking out of this well, and here she comes, and you just see him shaking his head going, what do you want? I mean, it's so obvious. She is after something. She's got the boys in tow, the sons of thunder, the two big burly guys, you'd think, got them in tow. Grant these two sons of mine to sit one on your right hand and the other on the left in your kingdom. Jesus, you wouldn't deny me. My boys, they're good boys. Let them sit on your right hand, your left. Now this is the predominant place in the kingdom. This is the top spot in the kingdom. This is actually going to come into play in a huge way. We talk about the Last Supper. We talk about that Seder. We'll talk about all those things. Placing those around the table at the Last Supper, the right hand and the left hand is the place of honor. Now remember who was on the right hand and the left hand. We can place people at that table. It makes that scene come alive. We'll save that for later. We'll go with that. But at the right hand and left side, the place of honor. Let my boys be there. Now I want you to think about that. Let that sink in. When you come into your kingdom, let my boys, one on your right hand and your left hand. Think about that. I'm going to come back to that. Jesus answered and said, you don't know what you're asking. You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink and be baptized with the baptism that I'm to be baptized? Are you willing? Are you able to go through this suffering that's going to happen? And they said, we're able. You can see them together. The boys look at each other. We're able. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Me more than him, but yes, we're able. You will indeed drink my cup and be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with. You're indeed going to go through that suffering. The baptism is suffering and difficulties. You're going to go through that. But to sit at my right hand and my left is not mine to give, but it is for those of whom is prepared for by my Father. Before we go into the response of the others, I wonder, because we do know that their mother was at the foot of the cross. She was one of the gals that was there. Remember what she asked. I've thought about this. I wonder if this went through her mind. Because she said, Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, let my boys, one on your left and your right hand, when you come into your kingdom. I wonder if she stood at the foot of the cross looking at Jesus coming into his kingdom. And who's on his right hand and his left hand? But two thieves being crucified. You wonder if she paused and said, I didn't even know what I was asking. My boys. Well, the 10 heard it, and they were greatly displeased with the two brothers. Well, they're greatly displeased not because look at you guys are so out of tune with Jesus. These guys are upset because they got there before them. They were trying to get one up from them. And Jesus calls them now they're on their way to Jerusalem. They've been with them, almost 3 years. And man, they should have got this. The rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, Jesus told them. Guys, come here. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. And those who are great exercise authority over them. Notice what it says. Yet it shall not be so among you. Whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. Whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your doulos, your bondslave. Jesus, the Son of Man, did not come to be served, but to serve, to give his life a ransom for many. Guys, come here. This is what the world does. The world rules it over. Literally, the idea is to rule down on people. That's what the world does. Not you. Not you. You want to be great? You need to learn how to serve. In this corporate thing that is out there, many churches will adopt that, where you have the pyramid, where you have the pastor at the top and the leaders under that, and this kind of trickle down thing from the top. And Jesus says that should not be so among you. It's exactly the opposite. That pyramid, the church leaders and stuff at the top, turn that upside down. They are serving everyone. You want to be great in God's kingdom? Learn to be a servant. It's really not about you. Jesus taught us that when we've done all that we know to do, still say, I'm an unprofitable servant. I've only done what you've asked me to do. It's not about us. It's not about how great and mighty we are. It's about how great and mighty he is. And you know what? God helps people. And God ministers to people. And you start serving people, and you'll find out a couple things. You'll find out, first of all, that you keep your eyes on Jesus, and there's joy in the journey if you watch the people. Sometimes people will get mean and will not receive, and all those things that'll happen. But this is also true. I see God all the time helping people, and I want to be involved with that. And so should all of us. I see God saving people. I see marriages healed. I see prodigals coming home. I see people being set free from addiction. I see all of that. Sometimes just at the end, can I confess this to you? Sometimes just at the end, where I just am weary, and I'm tired, I've been beat up, and most of it's self-inflicted stupidity on my own part. And I just want to say, I don't want to do this anymore. At that point, I see God move, and I see people's lives change, and I say, God, I'm sorry. Man, God, there's so much things that you're doing when we open our eyes and see that. It's not about us. If you stay self-absorbed and self-focused, you become a very bitter person, and you become a very lonely person. Self-righteousness will just eat us up. But when you see that it's about others, man, what a difference it makes. And he's teaching them that. Over and over, he's teaching them that. That last night, he'll wash their feet to teach them. You see what I've done. Serve one another that way. He teaches them that. Well, they'll learn that lesson. James and John and the rest of them, they'll learn that lesson. Well, we don't know a whole lot about James after Pentecost. We got about a 10-year gap before Acts chapter 12, where he is beheaded. But the thing is this, is that we got a time period that after Pentecost with James, James and John, we don't know what happened to him during those times. However, legend now goes wild over what happened. Legend says he went down to Spain and began to minister down there. A lot of miracles attached to what happened during his years, that 10 years in Spain. But we do know that he came back after those years, came back to Jerusalem, was beheaded by Herod. Herod had beheaded him. Many speculating because he was a Roman citizen, if you're familiar with that. Would have been crucified otherwise, but beheaded because of his dad's position and prominence, and he was a Roman citizen, so he was beheaded. Then the legend goes wild that his body was translated from Jerusalem back to Spain, and many miracles are attached to that. They have a church down there now that has the crypt of the Apostle James, and many pilgrims over the years, especially the Middle Ages, and that made pilgrimages there specifically to go there to that particular tomb to pray at the tomb of James. How did his body get back there? I don't know. There's a couple of churches that are claiming his body. I just think it's interesting. When you track history and the relics of the church and what people put a lot of faith in, they really believed, and if you're interested in this, I did some stuff on the internet on it. Just go to our website, and all this stuff I'm talking about is on there more in length. But they believed that there was a power as you begin to pray around certain relics and things. And the closer that relic was to Jesus, if it was a martyr, if it was someone, especially one of the 12, if it was a piece of the cross itself, that there's enough of what Martin Luther said, there's enough pieces of the cross floating around there in Rome that you could build a huge cathedral out of them. All right, so there's all these. I have some in my office, pieces of the cross. All right, and there's a huge story behind the ones that I have, and so all these things. There's lots of pieces of the cross, and those that prayed around those things had a power and a closer connection to God. But they just always looking for something, even in Catholicism very much so, is looking for something to connect with God. The tree downtown, cut the limb off. The sap runs out. It looks like the Virgin Mary. People to this day, and then someone defaced it. If you're familiar, if you go down there, you go, what is this tree with all these rosaries and all these candles around it? Well, that's the miracle tree in Salt Lake City. Hello. You got that going on. A few blocks down, you got the temple going on down there. This is a very religious town. We need Jesus. All right. Well, we want to connect with God. You want to connect with God? You don't need relics. You don't need those things. He's as close as a whisper away. Whisper away. So James, what happened to James? Well, we know what happened to him. He was beheaded by Herod, and then his body, I don't know, In Spain has got a crypt there that has his body, possibly. Very interesting. Well, let's keep going here. So you got James the Little. You got James the Great. Let's get to John. We're going to run out of time here. Let's talk about John just for a minute. John the Apostle. John the Beloved. John doesn't mention himself by name in his Gospels. You've heard me talk about this. He simply says the one that Jesus loved when he wants to talk of himself. Probably in his early 20s when he began to follow Jesus, in the chronology of this, because we do know about how old he was when he died, and we do know what era, because we're told by one of the early church fathers what emperor was reigning. Trajan was reigning, so we can put him in a window of time. And so, okay, now you backtrack to the day of Jesus. It had been in his early 20s when he began to follow Jesus. Man, I could spend some time here. I won't do it now, but somewhere we need to just remind ourselves that it's the kids that come to Christ. Statistically, as you look at this, those kids from about, I think it's like 16 or 17, even younger than that. I think it's like 14 and younger. That's where they come to faith in Christ. 70% come to faith in Christ there. Once they start getting their teenage years, it's less. Once you get in your 20s, once you get in older, the statistics of those that come to Christ. People come to Christ when they're kids. It's the vast majority. We need to really reach out to our kids, absolutely. But not neglect the other people groups, of course. But John, a young man, comes to faith. He begins to write the Gospel of John. He's an old man, begins to write. Maybe it was the pressure of those around him to write. Matthew, Mark, and Luke were already in circulation. Maybe it was the pressure of those. John, you were there. Tell us your story. Over 90% of the Gospel of John is new material from the others. So we have this synoptic, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Synoptic literally means to see with one eye. It's telling one story because they're very similar. John is telling stories that are not part of that. And John would remind us that if all the books in the world could not contain, if it was all written down, what Jesus had done, all the books in the world could not contain it. And there's a lot of things that he did, but we're going to stay to the Word of God, of course. I like church history and all that, but it is in its rightful place when you stay to the Word. You have James the Beloved. James, following Jesus, would end up in the island of Patmos. John is doing a phenomenal job here at 7:30, going through the book of Revelation. John on the island of Patmos. It was the Alcatraz of the day. It was the kind of work island that was there. And there he was there and received this revelation of Jesus Christ, what we have in our book, Revelation. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John he writes later in his life. The Gospel of John he writes later in his life. All these things. He ends up in Ephesus there, and he's taking care of Mary. Remember at the cross, at the foot of the cross, Jesus says, John, behold thy mother. Take care of her. Take care of her. And in Ephesus today, there's the tomb. It's empty, but there is the tomb of John that's there. They have excavated that whole area, and for some reason over the years, the bones have been removed, but there's still a place today that marks the tomb of John. John the Beloved. Man, you could spend hours and hours and hours. We spent 77. I thought that was amazing. 77 Sunday mornings going through the life of John, looking at the Gospel of John. So 77, that was a supernatural number, by the way. We're a supernatural church here. Right? So John, we can spend a lot more time on him. We'll catch up with these guys as we go. One more I want to talk about, we'll quit. We got the 2 Jameses, we got one more James. Okay, well, let me say this about John, though. I got to at least say this. John, at the end of his life, was arrested. And this is how it ended up in Patmos, according to the early church fathers, the historians would tell us that this is one of the ways the Romans would kill people, was to boil them in oil. Could you imagine that? You ever been like at McDonald's or something and see or maybe cooking oil? And you put that in there and all bubbles turkey at Thanksgiving or Christmas, you deep fry a turkey. Could you imagine sticking your hand in there? Could you imagine your whole body being in one of those? And yet God is faithful, and John wasn't done. I'm immortal. You cannot touch me until God is done with me. And I like that. I like that. John knew that. He's sitting in that thing. Hey, can you turn up the heat? The bubbles are nice. This is like an oil bath. This is really cool. This is, this is like the finest of spas. All right, is that God preserved him. If tradition is right, this is fairly early tradition. God preserved him because I do know this. I absolutely know this, that our time is in God's hands, and if we're not done, we're not done, and we're not going home. I absolutely believe. Now, you can be stupid and try to jump off. Well, I'm not done yet. I'm jumping. Well, God's going, no, you were done. And so you don't want to. But here's the thing is that I know that my life is in God's hands. And I know that our life is in God's hands. I know that our time is in God's hands. And John was going to be the only one of the disciples that would live out a long life. And in fact, the last thing that we have from him, again, from tradition, is that he was carried into the church there at Ephesus. And he lifted up his head and he said, little children, love one another. I love that. I love that. This old, senior, seasoned saint that walked with Jesus, this is how he summed it up. Love one another. James the just, or James the righteous, James Mr. Camel Knees, because that's what they called him. He had those that knew him from the early church days said that he was in the temple so much praying that his knees became like camel's knees. Why do we bring him up? He's not one of the disciples. Well, he is the one that would lead the church after the death of after Judas. You had those that would, Matthias would replace Judas there. But as the church began to take off and began to scatter because of persecution and began to go out into the world to preach the gospel, James stayed behind in Jerusalem and became the first leader of the church. James is the half-brother of Jesus. They had the same mother, different fathers. Hello. All right. And so, and in our Bibles, we have the book of James. He's the author of that book. There's another book in our Bibles that we believe is written by a half-brother of Jesus. Who's that? Amen. Hey, Jude. Okay, so Jude, right? So James and Jude. So James was someone that led the early church. Acts chapter 15, we have the Jerusalem Council. James is obviously the one that's leading over that. James is called the righteous or the just. He was a man that absolutely spent time in the presence of God, faithfully praying and all that. Again, getting the name camel knees for staying so much on his knees. His knees got knots on them from praying so much before God. And you read the book of James, he is a no-nonsense guy. He's right down the line. This is what it looks like to follow God. No nonsense. Well, again, what happened to him? Well, we're told that the Jewish elders didn't like what he was preaching, took him up to the pinnacle of the temple. At that time, it's probably about a 15-story drop, and threw him off of there, pushed him off of there. Looked down, he was still moving. And they ran down the stairs there, and you can see the route today, the Temple Mount area, and the fall that he would have took. Went down the stairs there, went down there with these clubs and beat him to death. This is the religious leaders of the day. And that's how James the Just, James the brother of Jesus, died. We have his ossuary today. That's a huge topic. If you're familiar with this, they found the bone box of James. So much speculation. Even the UPS guy broke it in transition. This is, priceless item. This is the bone box of James. They found it in this scratch, and all the different fights over that. Is it true? Is it a forgery? And all that. Probably is the real deal. Biblical Archaeology Review did extensive research on it. You can pick that up, and there's a good film on it, kind of doing all the research on this thing. So it looks like they found the bone box of James, the half-brother of Jesus, the author of the book of James. It's very cool. Interesting story, big saga, lots of stuff going on with archaeology in Israel. But that's a very interesting one. If you're interested in that, talk to me. I'll tell you about a film to get and some information. You can do some research. Good stuff. I'm looking forward to meeting these guys. I don't think they look maybe quite like this. What if they did an icon of us? I'd like it that they'd only show me here up. The guy with the belly. That's Pastor Terry. The guy with that belly right there. But these are heroes of the faith. We're not done with these guys because we'll spend some time with the rest of them and looking at them. But they're heroes of the faith. But they're just men. They were just women that followed God. No greater, no more mighty than any of us follow Christ in the sense of this. We can have that relationship with God. We can be used by God. We make choices. You're going to make a choice today if you're going to follow Him. You're going to make a ton of small choices, but you're going to be making choices. Do I follow you in this? Do I follow you in that? Make the choices every time. Make the choice towards Christ and watch what happens. Watch the great adventure that unfolds before you. You might find yourself in a place that God is using you greatly because you made choices. I'm going to follow you, God. I'm going to trust in you. That's all these guys did. All they did is they made an intelligent decision. I'm going to follow you every day of my life.